Hey everybody, we're going to be painting this really easy galaxy mountain scene. Welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a beginner level mountain scene. I pre-sketched out these mountains. You can do it however you like, but it's just a couple of mountain ranges here. Very simple. And then I am basically doing a wet on wet technique here. So you make the paper wet first, making sure you get up to the ridge of the mountain, the very top line, and then not touching the bottom mountain. So then once I'm done with that, I take my paintbrush, make sure the paper is still wet, and I just trace those lines with a Payne's gray paint. So I will post links for all the paints I use in this. There's only a few colors, so if you're on a tight budget and you're like, I just want to invest in a few colors and do some artwork, this is probably a good one because there's only like less. There's I think 5 colors all together. You can even get away with less. But this is my Payne's gray. If you're investing in a color, this is probably one of the best ones to invest in because it's very versatile. You could do a lot of like winter scenes and foggy and all these fun scenes, and it just sits by itself. So once I'm done with the top range, I'm going to do the second one. Same thing. Just cover the whole mountain with water, and then trace those lines with my paintbrush with the Payne's gray. And if you let go of the paintbrush kind of at the points, then it creates its own little like shadow and has this really, you can see me kind of just dotting in a few there and here and there. And it creates this really cool shadowy ridge line. So now I'm just going to flip this thing upside down and I'm going to paint the sky with water. Just make sure you don't touch your mountain because if you do, then it'll bleed into the sky and it'll look kind of not right. I mean, we can always fix it, but it's just easier. Just get as close to the ridgeline as you can without actually touching it, and make sure it's good liberal amount of water so that you have this really cool bleeding effect. And then I'm just dropping in my paints, and I'm doing this with the Dr. P.H. Martin, so they're pretty concentrated in color, and goes a long way. So I'm doing a black on the very edges and filling in a ultramarine in between, which is a blue. And then I'm going to do a tallow green, which is again, it's like an aqua-ish green. And then in the middle, kind of where you would see your Milky Way, I'm going to put in some drops of white. And the white bleeds into the other colors, but in a kind of cool, veiny effect. As you can see, it kind of pushes the other colors out. I'm not sure what kind of chemical makeup causes that, but I think the white's just like, I'm stronger. I'm a stronger paint. I'm going to take over. And then I'm going to swirl my colors together to just give it that little swirly nighttime effect. You just want to be very careful not to overwork this because if you do, you're going to end up with kind of a muddy mush. And the black, as you can see, it kind of just stayed put. So I'm adding a little bit more black. I'll add a little bit more blues to make it more vibrant, a little bit more greens, just to give it more of that effect. And you don't want it to blend because you're creating that Milky Way effect, so or galaxy effect. So then you don't want it to bleed because, or you don't want it to blend perfectly because we're not going for like a blended sky. We're going for that galaxy effect, which kind of has that cloudy, mystical look to it. And right now, you're probably looking at it like, wow, this is just, you're just doing black over your colors. But these will stand out when they dry, and they'll be very cool. You'll start to see those colors pop. Right now, because they're wet, the blacks and the blues end up looking very similar to each other. But when they dry, it'll pop out, and you'll be like, oh, okay, I see what it is. I taught this class yesterday in person, and people were just oohing and awing with the Galaxy FS. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it worked. And the trick is to just make sure you don't overwork it. And I'm pulling some of the colors in between just to make that white galaxy effect kind of seep through. And as you can see, there's a little bit more white. And then I'm going to also make sure that I get it now, fill in that kind of gap between the mountain and the sky I was doing, because you just don't want it to be this big strip of white in between your mountain and your sky, because you're like, well, what is that? So that's what I'm doing now. And the paint's pretty dry. The mountains are pretty dry. So even if I touch it a tiny bit, it should be fine. But just be careful. You still want to be careful not to touch it. Maybe just a tiny bit so it doesn't bleed, just in case. But if it does, just take your napkin or towel and just dab it really quick to stop the bleeding, which I guess that could be taken multiple ways. That's how you would do it in real life, right? You put pressure on your wound to stop the bleeding. You're gonna put pressure on your paper to stop the bleeding. So here it is in a faster mode, just so you can kind of see it, kind of a quick review. I feel like I always like to time lapse, because seeing it just kind of come together mentally helps me figure out what I'm doing. All right, so we're still upside down, and I'm going to put in my tree trunks. And the reason I do this is because when you press down the paper, and you lift away, then your thinner line is going to be at the bottom. And we naturally write from left to right and top to bottom. So it's kind of a natural motion to have a thinner line at the bottom. Now, this isn't the case for everybody. If you haven't tried this before, just take a scratch paper and see. Some people, they still write side up. It works better. I think it's because their brain is kind of overpowering the habit of their hand. So just try it out first before you actually do it on your painting. Once I'm done with my tree trunks, and I did them in various heights and shapes, some closer to the other ones than some of the other ones, which is, how a forest is. You never see perfectly even trees. And really take this to heart, because when I was teaching this class, whenever I teach classes, beginner level, and I'm teaching these forests, I always say, make sure that your trees are not perfectly even and perfectly spaced out, because a forest is never like that. And people still do it. And I don't know if it's just your brain just wants to space them out evenly, but you really do want to have staggered sizes and shapes and opacity, all of it, because that makes it look more organic and more realistic. I did go pretty high up on my ridgeline because the mountains are in the backdrop, but you can still see it. And I'm just doing this like zigzaggy effect, just a mishmash of dotting my paper with my paintbrush. So it's obviously not, there's no rhyme or reason to it. I'm just making sure it's a little bit narrower at the top and wider at the bottom. And that's it. That's pretty much it. Trees are really easy to paint if you don't overthink it. And I think if you're struggling with it, you might be overthinking it. Just go bonkers with your paintbrush. And as you can see, it is also, as you start off, it's going to be darker in paint and lightens up. I'm totally fine with that. I actually want that because it creates that kind of depth and lightness and stuff. I'm doing the trees in the same colors I did the mountain range in, which is the Payne's Gray. So basically, to keep it easy to remember, Payne's Gray is the bottom half of the painting, and then the rest of the colors are the top half. And the top half are, for the galaxies, are, the black, blue, green, and white. So 5 colors, that's it. And you can pretty much, you can use the same paintbrush for the whole thing, but when I teach this and when I do it, I like to use a fatter paintbrush to do the wet on wet, so I can cover more space with water quicker and it doesn't dry, especially if the air around you is really dry. And then I use a smaller brush for my trees, because you just don't want it to be a clunky tree. You want it to look a little bit more organic. So, and you can see my paintbrush here for the trees, it's pretty small. This is a 6x9 I'm painting. Some people say, how do you do a 6x9? I've never seen the Arches paper in 6x9. It's a 9x12 cut in half. So that's how I do my 6x9s. And if you've ordered from me, you'll know that I'm not limited. I limit the sizes that you can order in. And a lot of that's because I like to use the watercolor blocks. And that means I'm using only those sizes, but I did add the 6x9 just because I knew a lot of people were wanting a smaller size, or they're on a tighter budget. So I did throw that in there, which means I just cut the paper in half. But I usually still use a block first, and then I'll cut it in half. And then I'll use the other half to do stuff like this. And then I'm just taking a white, you can use a gel pen. You can use an acrylic pen. I'm using an acrylic pen here just because I couldn't find my... I actually, not that I couldn't find my gel pen, I knew exactly where it was. It was downstairs. I didn't want to go down the stairs. I was being lazy. So you can use a white gel pen, a white acrylic pen. You can use bleed proof white, which is typically what I use. That's what I use on the left side. I use a bleed proof on the left painting. I did a bleed proof white and a dotting tool. But this one I'm using an acrylic pen, and I'm actually kind of liking the way it came out. The acrylic pens to me are just kind of finicky. They dry up, they get, they just get kind of cakey. So not the biggest fan of the acrylic pens. I do like some of the Christmas ornaments in them. If you know me, I'm not the biggest fan of acrylic and oil in general. It's not a fan of me either, so there's no hard feelings on either side. But in this case, I'm using an acrylic pen. And the other thing, like the forests, stagger them. Don't keep perfectly grouped stars, because stars are not like that. You'll see clusters of stars. You'll see parts of the sky that's darker. So on the left side, I covered the whole sky in stars, including the white part. This one, I'm just doing the dark side of the sky, that black. I like that effect personally better because I think it just has this really cool, like, galaxy brightness going into the night sky. So it's up to you what you want to use. And you can see how, like I said, you don't want to blend it. You can see how these colors are kind of vibrant and they're standing out. And then the way these paints sit, the black always kind of sits apart from it. So it just has a really cool effect. So if you guys like this painting, you want me to do more like this, let me know. Let me know how it worked out for you. Was this as easy as I said it was? Hopefully. And it's an easy one to do as in time-wise too, so you can always keep trying it. Have a great day.